The Aquest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.
Hello podcast listeners and welcome to the autumn-winter 2025 season of the Aquest Podcast with me, Lawlor. It's great to be back. This season, we're doing things a little bit differently. For each of the episodes, I'm going to be joined by my funds bro, Dáire Lawlor, where we put on our agony aunt hats and deal with some of the questions that we get asked often about life in the funds industry and different issues that come up from time to time. So for this episode, we're gathering the questions that were asked around things got to do with careers in the funds industry and seeing if we can tackle them like the two old codgers that we are. So this episode is called I'm a funds lawyer, get me out of here. And we'll be dealing with things like how to get into the funds industry and how to get out of it and how to survive while you're here. So sit back and enjoy this episode of the Aquest Podcast.
The Aquest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.
Hello, Dáire. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Danny. It's a pleasure to be here this windy and horrible day.
Are you ready?
It's good to get out of the rain.
Something to get you off the streets.
This is it, exactly.
So for this season of the Aquest Podcast, it's a little bit different than previous season.
Okay.
So you and me, right? And we're going to be covering a series of topics that relate to the kind of questions that we get asked most often. Okay. So my producer and editor of the podcast, she came to me and she said, after the last season when we were preparing for this season, she said, well, why don't you make the podcast a bit more relatable, a bit less technical? I think the word she used was boring.
Okay, right. How dare she?
So this is a little bit more where we're going to kind of just chat through some of the questions that often come across our desks.
Yeah.
Fair enough?
I'm all for it.
So you better tell people who you are. You've been on the podcast before, Dáire.
I have been on the podcast before, but I'm always happy to talk about my favourite subject, being myself.
You're good at that.
So I run an advisory firm called Interwoven, which basically works in joining the dots between emerging technology and traditional technology, between traditional finance and distributed finance or DeFi, and between emerging technology and legacy technology. And I swim in those waters predominantly in the funds industry. My background is around the consulting services group in State Street for almost 10 years. Prior to that, I worked on the IT side of the business for a vendor called Information Mosaic for a year or so. And prior to that, I worked with what was then Dáire Securities and now Sumi Trust, a Japanese hedge fund administration service, in the IT department, running what we would now call a comprehensive digital transformation program.
So what I heard, Dáire, is you're a funds techie kind of guy.
Well, I'm originally a techie kind of guy. So I only came into the funds industry after about 20 years of having worked in other firms. So I worked with a startup in the localization industry for 10 years, exited twice during that time and did quite nicely out of that. Set up my own consultancy business back in the year 2000, which I ran successfully from the perspective of my clients, but less so from the perspective of my accountants and that man, which gave me a good, harsh lesson in the realities of running a business. I subsequently, one of those clients hired me. I ran a software localization business in the north of England for a year. Wanted to come back home and was offered a job by a client who had worked with the consultancy who had become the chief technology officer with the Japanese hedge fund administration firm. So I had a very unusual entrance into the financial services business in 2005.
Right.
So 20 years as a funds techie and subsequently a funds business person. My last 10 years were on the business side,
right,
in State Street.
So you're well placed then to help me through some of these FAQs that have come in.
I will opine as best I can.
Good man. Well, so obviously I've been doing the Aquest Podcast for a little while, and I assume people kind of know who I am. But briefly, I am in the funds industry. I'm a funds financial services lawyer by training, and I also spent some time with the central bank, so I've been a securities regulator, and similar to yourself, left and set up my own consultancy. So I've been in that role for about 8 years now, and in the industry now for 20 years-ish. So plenty of water under the bridge, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with the first question that's come in. Dear Danny, I'm in college should I pursue a career in the funds industry? And what is the funds industry anyway? So that's something like, I get quite a bit because I have kind of nieces and nephews that are at that age where they're going through college and they look at the shiny buildings along the quays and they wonder what is it and what are they doing and should I get a piece of it? What would you say to somebody? Should I get a piece of it?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because the industry has changed so much. So the industry was kind of predicated on bringing in youth and enthusiasm and honing it to do relatively menial tasks that then form the grounding for an understanding of the industry. So the cohort of the industry that are now in the process of retiring or moving on, and there's certainly, if anybody is looking in LinkedIn, you'll see there are swathes of people announcing exciting new career moves.
Yes, that's true.
In their mid-50s, but there was a career progression. You were brought in, you ticked and bashed stuff, and as a consequence of that, you learned the nuts and bolts of the administration and back office business and onward and upward.
Yeah.
That's changed a lot, and the philosophy has been for a number of years, particularly among the larger corporations, it's, look at your processes and figure out, can you eliminate it, can you automate it, or can you outsource or offshore it? The cost management and the efficiency of following the some business models and the globalization of financial markets have led to, maybe less of that entry level task work being there. Having said that, the mindset of automation and how I have been successful in the funds industry was by virtue of being someone who was able to understand the language of the business, but also the language of the technologist. And they were regarded as very separate things. One of the things when I first started, having worked in IT from 1990 up to, the mid 2000s when I came into the funds industry, was this concept of there being the business and IT, and that they were separate entities.
Oh yeah, you got to keep them apart. Oh my God.
Yes, and both, the IT couldn't understand why the business couldn't just tell them what they actually wanted, and the business couldn't understand why IT hadn't built a big red button that you could hit and make everything happen. And there was this ongoing tension and risk sort of sat there as the referee in the middle of it in a lot of firms. That's changed a lot. There's a lot more convergence than there was. And the change move from waterfall to agile approaches in technology have made a big difference there. So there is a need for people who understand, who are technology natives, and this generation are that.
Yeah.
And they have a number of edges on the traditional, accountancy and law, sole focused roles that were previously the case. So I think there's definitely a lot of wealth in this world. It may not be very fairly distributed, but it's definitely out there. And that wealth needs to be managed. There is a need for security in a world gone mad, and that involves savings and investment. So the industry has a purpose. And while, there are many beaks getting dipped along the way in there, nonetheless, we need the financial system in order to have a successful society. Striking the balance between, an economy and a society is a political challenge. But on the economy side, the funds industry has a very real role to play. So there is purpose. And I think for young people coming in, there are definitely roles. I think those roles have changed fairly radically. But there is also a huge need for the industry to be relevant to the younger cohort, the coming generation. To your point, your nieces and nephews, or indeed my kids, are of an age where it's their turn now. We're passing the baton on to them. They're the people who are going to create wealth. They're the people who need to save and invest, however impossible it might seem to consider purchasing a house or what have you, to those people, as it was to us at that age. I have to say, this industry exists for among other things, that purpose. And I think there are great opportunities for young people in there.
And there ends the party political broadcast on behalf of the funds industry in Ireland.
Well, but I think it's true. And I think it's funny looking at so I have a 23-year-old son. Well, he's 23 in a week's time. He's just graduated. A bunch of his mates have just graduated. He chose to go into journalism, a noble profession.
Mm-hmm.
But a number of his buddies were doing it. Quite a lot of them, interestingly, were doing sustainability studies, which still has currency in Europe, albeit that it may be under attack in other markets. But and also business, your standard business, legal, accounting type careers. But I was interested how many of those guys are still being offered jobs by the Big Four, for example, which I thought perhaps AI might reduce those entry points. But it seems to me there's the placeholder job offers to guys at the end of third year after their internship are still happening.
Yeah. So that sounds like a long way of saying yes, it's a good idea to pursue.
Well, I've never used a short answer when a long one would suffice, Danny.
Well, how I got into the funds industry, so I was training in a law firm, and obviously you rotate through different divisions. And before that, when I was in college, I did my J1 in New York.
Yeah.
I was a porter in an apartment block.
Right.
And you'll like this because you're a music man. One of the tenants was Joey Ramone.
Oh, very good.
Big Joey, yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. Very quiet guy.
Yeah.
It was around the time that they released the anthology.
Yeah.
Late 90s, I think.
Right.
And I had to go into the apartment one day. We were measuring windows to change the windows. And the apartment was full, top to bottom, with CDs of the anthology. You give me one, Lodi?
Yeah.
Not at home.
No.
The
swine.
Had to go and buy it. Imagine that. But another guy who I'd met there, he gave me life advice, right?
Yeah.
And number one was, because he knew I was studying law at the time, go into a sector that's emerging.
Yeah.
And he had said kind of dispute resolution. But
when
I was back in my law training days, funds was the emerging sector. And it's funny, so it was in the boom years, right? Pre-crisis. Everybody wanted to litigation, commercial and property. Nobody wanted to do funds, really. So there was great opportunities. And with that kind of voice in my head, I'll do funds. So that's how I kind of got into funds. But I just liked it. I was very interested in learning all the industry and learning what it was that the rules
were there to it.
And then you have great opportunities because you could go into your law firm and stay in your law firm. You can go into your law firm and go and work in industry in a firm. You can go and work in the regulator like I did. You can move abroad. And so there's great transferability and great opportunities. Now, that is a few years ago, but I still think if you are in a law firm and that opportunity is there, I still think it's definitely one that's worth considering very seriously. As a sector, it's one that continues to be busy. There's always going to be regulatory change because there's always going to be new developments and innovations, and there's always going to be the threat of misbehavior. So there's always going to be new rules. So there's always work there for the lawyers. AI is obviously a complicating factor, and I think how that's going to impact. But law firms generally. But should I pursue a career in the funds industry? I think you definitely should.
Yeah, I would say, if there is definitely a varied career to be had there, there's definitely purpose to be had there. It's changing a lot, but there's no sign of it coming to a halt. And there's things like the Savings and Investment Union coming along to bring, which is going to bring.
Look at you throwing the terms out there. You've done your homework.
I do my best. It's the only way I can get by, can't spoof all of the time.
Next question.
Hit me.
Dear Danny, I'm working in a fund administrator and I'm tired of bolting the wheel on the front of the car. How do I make progress in my funds career?
Broaden your horizons. Don't restrict yourself to any one particular area. If there's one thing that I think is happening more and more and more, it's around convergence. I think it began with, to your point about regulation, we had the boom years, 2000. So I spent a cold and lonely year in the wilderness around 2009, 2010.
You weren't the only one,
when the industry, when the financial markets collapsed and the world was a very bleak place. It was good for me. I think I needed to drink a cold bowl of humility soup at the time. Hubris had taken over. We all thought we were masters of the universe, so we were brought back down to earth. Did us no harm.
As a nation, we were.
As a nation and as individuals, I was certainly, believing my own hype too much to time.
Did you have to sell the chalet in Bulgaria?
The chalet, but sadly, I used to berate myself that I hadn't invested in bank shares and offshore property. Funny enough, as it turns out, that weakness translated into a strength in due course. But what was interesting was that when I moved to the business side, working in the fund accounting side of State Street, at a time when the regulators were figuring out how do we make sure that doesn't happen to us again. The key to the thing became data. So all of a sudden, while a fund was effectively defined by its NAV, here's all the things I own, here's the income I expect, and here are the costs. And then I divide that by the number of shares in issue, and that gives me my net asset value. That was effectively, that's what the funds industry in Ireland delivered, was clever people to do those sums. After 2010, all of a sudden, the risk profile became as important as the notional market value and previous cost perspective. So all of a sudden, you were worried about the issuer, you were worried about the geopolitical region, what it was in, and all of a sudden, a much broader perspective on what an asset was required, and that needed to get more data. And to get more data, you need IT. And to put order on that data, you need data analysis and those various skill sets. So all of a sudden, fundamental to the value delivery into the fund's business became more than an accountancy exercise. It became an enriched data perspective on what was happening, up to the point of, I think Solvency II was for 238 data points around any particular asset. And obviously that's expanded since with ESG and with some of the other regulatory perspectives that are out there. So it has become a data business to a degree. And that convergence of data, technology, and the housekeeping elements of accountancy, what have you, and the legal structures within which they live, that's giving great opportunity. So don't think of yourself as purely an accountant or purely a lawyer or purely a technologist, but take a broader lensed perspective on what you are doing is being done now and how it will be done henceforth.
Yeah, and I certainly found, and maybe it's not the same today, but I suspect probably is, but if I would, say, interview people who come from, say, a fund administration business, they tended to know a small thing very well.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't necessarily know beyond the four sides of their desk. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they'd know how to put the wheel in the car, but they wouldn't know what a car is.
Yes.
And it really is important for a lot of reasons, but to be able to step back and to as you said, broaden your horizons and get a better understanding of how the bit that you do fits into a bigger ecosystem and what that ecosystem is and what do the other bits do. And let's go and get some experience.
Exactly.
I think, because I came through in a law firm, obviously, once you go into your funds department, it's funds that you're dealing with. But you do have that broader view because you're dealing with them across, to an extent you do, regulation and then through to delivery and then ongoing maintenance and regulatory change that comes down the tracks. So it is broader than just putting the wheel in the car. But you don't get operational experience. You don't ever sit in front of somebody trying to sell a fund. Yeah. I mean, you don't make investment management decisions. So even, lawyers, although it's probably a little bit broader experience than if you were in, say, a fund administrator, you do need to try and get yourself out there. Maybe that's a secondment to an industry firm, which I did as well. That was really beneficial. Or maybe it is a move then into an in-house role. Or however you do it, you do need to get that head lifted up and look around. And the thing is, with a lot of firms, they do have good training budgets. They get credit for training budgets. So they're it might be harder to squeeze pay rise out of them, right?
Yeah.
But to get funding for training is generally, you're often pushing a fairly open door.
Yeah.
So I would say, what are we now? October. As you get towards the end of the year, you'll be getting into performance reviews and planning for next year. Get training stuff on there, get your head up. You have to be interested, right? And there's no way to...
You have to be actively curious. Maybe that's a better way of putting it than broaden your lens. Sounds trite, but you have to be curious and get involved in, industry associations. They're always looking for people to partake in working groups. They're always running webinars, seminars, whatever. And just go a little bit further outside yourself. I was responsible for onboarding business into State Street. And that was really good because, you need to understand the transfer agency, the depository, fund accounting, securities lending, co-op scrubbing, legal, trustee, So you get a very good overview of what it's all about. But if you're involved in those programs in your business, be curious about the program upstream and downstream for you. Who am I a dependency to? Why is what I do important to them? Who's downstream from me? How can I articulate better to them? And, just expand your borders, I would say.
Yes, and if someone says to me, "What's your ideal employee?" It's somebody who's got cop on and enthusiasm.
Yeah,
enthusiasm. To get the word out. And you get that. You can go pretty far. Okay, next question. Dear Danny, you used to work for the central bank. Should I join the central bank? It's a question for me more than you, but you have a
probably
stand.
is. Well, I, as somebody who's engaged with the central bank, wearing numerous hats over the years, one thing I would say, I think that I don't think anyone would disagree with me, is the central bank has come on a very long journey of transformation over the last 5 years.
Oh, I would say
probably more.
15. I'd say since our banking crash.
Well, I would say my experience of the central bank in the early years was generally, because I was involved in the IT side up to 2010, was I met them when they wanted to beat us up because we were too slow in getting something that had been promised, built and completed, or what we had built and completed wasn't giving the right answer all of the time, or there was some other quibble or problem around output of what.
But who doesn't like beating up the IT guys, right?
Doing. So yes, well, in fairness, it's a good. We actually, when we're on our own, we beat ourselves up.
Delighted to hear that.
Just keep our hands in. But yeah, now I find them, and admittedly, I've done work with them, but they have really transformed from being the angry teacher to, I think, a collaborative participant in our world. They have a job to do. They have a very big stick to hit you with if they feel that it merits it. But they're much more curious. They're much more aware of the fact that we're all on this bullet train moving at tremendous speed, and that we need to it's all around the analogy I use a lot with them. I did some work with them, helping them to understand risks and compliance and culture within the DeFi space, and talking to them about their experience of, looking at CASPs and BASPs and various innovative financial approaches. That they have an established rule book. The financial services system that we work in is got rules. And people who are in that ecosystem come to understand those rules either through professional focus or by virtue of performing the roles and finding out where the guardrails are. But the analogy I used is that they were like a rugby 15, and the DeFi community were like an interpretive dance group, and they were looking to try and find a way to play together.
Yes.
And there's a lot of effort has to go into assimilating that. But they were managing to do it, and they were finding common ground. And while there's a lot of noise and a lot of moaning goes on about the central bank and whether they're fast enough or innovative enough or what have you, I think they've come on a huge journey. And I do think, and this is my recurring theme for the latter half of this year, is that regulation is a feature, not a bug, of our financial system. And sometimes hurtling at the speed of light into the great unknown isn't the best place for example, my life savings to go.
True.
And I think there's strength in a European position in a world where maybe regulation and probity aren't being valued as much in some other markets. I think the European regulation-based approach may well be the source of some comfort over the coming years. We'll see.
Well, when things go wrong. We won't dwell too much more on this one, because our next episode we are going to chat about the love languages of a financial regulator. But from my perspective, in terms of should I join the central bank, I would say absolutely yes. I very much enjoyed working there. It's a challenging environment. You're surrounded by people who are very, very good and very dedicated to what they do and take it seriously in the public interest. It gave me a different view in the world, and it gave me a roundedness to my experience that, to be quite frank, has made my career, I would say. Certainly been a very important part to it. So it's definitely worth considering that as a career option.
And it's a young and vibrant place to work. Like they've brought in they've hired a lot of people over the last since they moved into the building, and it's full of young and bright people doing interesting things. It
is. Now it's far from perfect. And there is stuff about working in any large organisation that after a while
Which brings us neatly to your next question, I think.
Yes. So we wrap up in centre bank. Should I join centre bank? Yeah, definitely. Definitely should, or should seriously consider it. So next question. Dear Danny, I'm kind of fed up with where I'm at. I'm thinking about setting up my own consultancy. Should I do it? It's relevant to both of us.
Yeah.
How do you guide somebody when they ask you, like following your path or something?
Well, so I think I mentioned I made a fairly serious hames of my first attempt at running my own consultancy. You'd think you're saying, oh, you're getting rid of all my bosses. They're my boss. I would now be my own boss. But you actually acquire a multiplicity of bosses. There's the bank, the tax man, there's all your customers, what have you. So you actually go from having one person telling you what to do to many people having to be kept happy. So there are a lot of hungry mouths to feed in a consultancy space. It can be precarious, when times are good and you're busy. It's definitely can be rewarding. But when the tide goes out, if people are looking to cut spending, one of the first things they'll do is furlough the consultants. So it can be, it's not necessarily a gravy train either. It takes a fair bit of slog. You're at it 8 years now. Yeah. I'm 5 years in this time. I'm still standing and I'm enjoying it thoroughly, and business is good at the moment. But there have been a couple of troughs along the way, and so it really depends on one's appetite for a bit of excitement on things that you might regard as being very stable. So forget your paid holidays. You're paying your own health insurance. You're paying all the bills. And it's very much predicated on your having customers out there who are willing to pay you to do
appetite for risk. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think when I get asked that question about setting up your own consultancy, I feel like I can't really say don't do it, in the sense that, well, I've done it, right? And I'm at it a few years now. And so if I say, oh no, you shouldn't do it, it's me saying, well, I was good enough to be able to do it, but you wouldn't be good enough. You wouldn't be able to handle it or whatever, right? So I would be very cautious about that. But I do think when it comes to setting up your own consultant, you are now self-employed. You are primarily in marketing, right? I grew up on a dairy farm. So my folks are dairy farmers. And my dad has a very, very even temperament, which you need to have if you're in the farming game, because some years it's up and some years it's down, and particularly actually if you're more in cereals. But you have good years and you have bad years, and you have to be able to ride out the bad years, and you have to not lose the run of yourself in the good years. And that's the same for anybody who's self-employed, but doing consultancy, particularly if you're a solo consultant, you have to be able to deal with the downs as well as the ups, and be able to sleep at night knowing, the risks that are out there and what have you. You are very well advised to, try and line up your initial projects before you get going, so you've got some income stream coming in. But I definitely found the first 3 years there was quite an unevenness to that, and then it kind of settles as you grow a profile and a client base and repeat business and all that kind of stuff. So should you do it? I'm not going to tell you not to do it, but you need to put your big boy pants on and be able to take the rough with the smooth.
Yes.
And keep it even on it, and not get too up and down, not get too upset.
Yeah. No, I think that pretty much sums it up. Having said that, I love it. I've probably made myself unemployable in any other format at this stage.
I'm surprised you ever played.
I like having it. Yeah. If you ask most of my bosses, they would agree with you. But somehow or another, value was delivered, and we still have good relationships. But yeah, no, I enjoy it. I enjoy the variety. I enjoy the excitement, and the thrill of winning business is definitely very sweet, and compensates for the devastation of those days when they go expense management, and all of a sudden your retainer is either halved or disappears altogether. So it's a double-edged sword, not for everyone, but definitely. And there's a need for us, people hire us. So
must be something.
Must be
something,
right? Doing something.
So last question before we wrap up. This is a good one. Dear Danny, I'm hanging on by a fucking thread. Should I get out?
If you're not happy doing something and you have a viable alternative, you should grasp it with both hands and go and do it without a doubt. However, think very hard about what you're doing. Our business is very busy. It's very demanding. It's not life or death, but it's as near as damn it. It's money, and people take money very, very seriously. So the white noise associated with what we do, it can be enormous. That gives people purpose and rhythm and can be exciting, but it can feel overwhelming. If it is overwhelming, examine, are you managing your workload properly? You need to look after your mental health. It's the most important thing that you have going for yourself, your health in general. If you're feeling that it's that bad and you've explored all the alternatives, are you so typically I remember doing a management course years ago. This was when I was working in a localization startup, and we had grown from 30 people to 600 people in about a year. It was absolute madness. And we were doing very well. We were winning more business than we could service. I wound up moving out to India for a year to hire people in India and build together an engineering team out in India, because we just couldn't get enough engineers in Ireland. That was the kind of rate that we were growing at. But one of the things that somebody said to me on one of the courses, we'd all come in, there was 30 of us, we were all sitting around tables figuring out how to, all of a sudden you've got a team of 30 working for you. What do you do? And they used to say that one of the measures, if you've got a member of staff who is struggling, one of three things is happening. Either that person isn't suitable for that job, and you either need to find them another job, or maybe just agree with them that there's something else they should be doing, or they're taking on too much and they're doing that either for reasons of ambition or because they're not actually suitable for the job, or they haven't been set up for success in the job, and as a result they're having to put twice as much effort to get a result as somebody else is. Right, which brings it to the third one, or else you as a manager aren't setting them up for success. You haven't given them the training and the preparation. You're giving them too much work. You're giving them inadequate instruction, what have you. So there are a number of reasons why people can find themselves feeling like they're hanging by a thread.
Yeah.
The adrenaline and the excitement of coming up to a deadline, working in a team and working late and eating the pizzas is very exciting and relatively healthy in my view, if it's happening occasionally with a reason and a known completion date when it stops. If it's your constant state, there's something wrong. Your job description is wrong. Your preparedness for the job or the support you're getting from your manager and your firm are incorrect. Yeah. So you need to explore all of those. If it is the case that it's just not the job for you, then the best thing you can ever do for yourself is to say, I'm off. I'm off. Go and do something else.
Yeah, I see this by degree. And what I mean is, some people would say, oh gosh, I'm bored. I've been doing this for a long time. It's the same every day. And my real passion is I'd love to run a yoga studio, or I'd love to have a bakery or something like that. So complete career change. And I guess the challenge with something like that is you're actually generally pretty well remunerated in the industry, right? So when you shift and do something else, or even if when I'm going to go back and go into tech or something like that, right? You're going from probably a reasonably senior position and a salary that's commensurate, and you're sliding all the way down the snake, and then you're at the bottom of the queue, and you're in a very stark position, both in terms of your knowledge and salary, or you're going into, you're going to follow your passion and your startup, and, revenue generally lower. So that's not that easy to handle, So there is that side to it. And then if you take something that is a passion and make it your job, then it becomes your job, right? And I'm pretty sanguine in all this stuff now from my farming background, right? And I kind of feel, it then just becomes your job. And then that's the thing that you got to grind through. And you grind through, but guess what? You're not getting paid as much as you used to do, So I wouldn't say don't do it, but I'd be kind of, I think for me, a better approach would be to find a way to do your current role in a way that you find more satisfying and interesting, rather than jack it in and go and search good.
It depends on how thin the thread is.
Well, that's good. Like, if it is if you are, standing on the window ledge of a high build, no, that's not the place to be. Now, I do think businesses are much more supportive, and that there's a much better understanding that stress is an actual thing, mental health is an actual thing. So you can get, and you absolutely know if it's getting to that state, then you either need a break or you need to just change altogether or whatever.
But it's such a big and varied industry, I think the key thing to any of these things is be honest with yourself in the first instance. Examine what exactly is the cause of your stress and what is that you want to do, and then be honest with other people around you about what you want. And most of the financial services businesses, and indeed the law firms that are in this area, are quite large. They need people in different areas, Fine. Just make sure before you jump out of the airplane, either you have a parachute or that the flame thing has landed.
Absolutely. And you're right, because I said at the outset, there's great opportunities, whether it's in-house, in practice, in the regulator, in an industry association, in another jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So there are ways and means. But I do think, when we wrap up on this, right, we are quite a remove from our end customer. Like the purpose of the industry is to protect people who have invested in funds, and they're investing because they're saving for retirement, they're saving for putting kids into college or whatever.
Yeah.
And we very, very, very rarely sit down in front of the person whose money we're managing, right? Yeah. And who would suffer if we didn't do our job properly, if they got ripped off, if they got overcharged, if there was a fraud and somebody stuffs all their assets into a suitcase and runs off to Mexico with it, right? We're very far from them, but they exist. You follow the chain far enough, they're there. And so although it can be harder to see, you're not the brain surgeons, you're not saving your life in front of you, but there are consequences and there are positives to the industry and each individual doing their job well. Yeah. So don't forget that.
Yeah, no, fair enough. On that rallying call.
Yes, that's enough.
I enjoyed the chat, Danny.
Good. Well, good to get your kind of tap into your many years of experience and careers and stuff like that. I said next episode we're going to talk about the love languages of the central bank. No, regulators. That's
yes. Yeah, I think that'd be interesting, and there's certainly no shortage of material.
Okay, on that, we'll wrap it up. We look forward to chatting to you on the next episode of the Aquest Podcast. We see you there.
Thanks very much.
The Aquest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.